part of me doesn't even know why I rewatched this. And I just feel like, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I'm just going to go through the series. If I can make it through it. Now, I don't even really know how to do this video, to tell you the truth, because there's some mixed thoughts that I have on this movie. I did watch it years ago. Um, this movie was, 2007. It premiered at a film festival in 2007, and then it was released theatrically across the U.S. in 2009. I think I probably watched it in... First time I watched it, I think, was around 2012-ish, somewhere around that. I didn't see any of the movies in theaters. I think they have 6 or 7 of them now. I think 7. Now, let's look at the reviews on the movie. Well, first, let me get to the synopsis. And honestly, I need some of your thoughts in the comment section if you've seen the movie, if you remember it. Soon after moving into a suburban tract home, Katie and Micah become increasingly disturbed by what appears to be a supernatural presence. Hoping to capture evidence of it on film, they set up video cameras in the house but are not prepared for the terrifying events that follow. Now, when I first saw this movie, I thought, okay, this was like 99% boring, and the 1% of it that wasn't so boring was like the ending, which they saved for like the last 60 seconds. Then I watched it again, and my opinion was almost the same. I said, okay, this was 90% boring, maybe 10% interesting. I was amazed by the budget to box office ratio. The budget on the film was $215,000. The box office was over $194 million. Distributed by Paramount Pictures, DreamWorks Pictures, all that. The director was Oren Peli. So here's the cast. There wasn't much of a cast to it, so you mainly saw the 2 people throughout the movie, which was Katie and Micah, which, by the way, they used their real first names in it. So the actor and actress who played them, respectively, were Micah Sloat and Katie Featherston. So I say props to them for this. You also had Mark Fredericks as Dr. Fredericks, Ashley Palmer as Diane, and Amber Armstrong as Amber. So all of them except one of them had used their real names. So here's the reviews on this movie. Some of these reviews are actually a lot higher than I thought. And by the way, for a movie like this, I'm actually surprised that this actually made more money at the box office than almost every other horror film that I've talked about on this show, both slasher and non-slasher. But as we know, as a general rule, horror films are going to be on the lower end of the spectrum when it compared to the other genres, action, drama, romance, even comedy. So Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 57%. Internet Movie Database, 63. Common Sense Media, 80. And Google users gave it a 70 to 86%. Now, I'm curious to see what some of the... Hold up, I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. I'm curious to see what the top positive comments are and what the top negative comments are under the Google users. Let's see what the positive ones say. 5 stars. One person here says, in my opinion, this might be the best movie I've ever seen. Yes, the budget for this movie is incredibly low at $15,000, I believe. The post-production was $215,000. Either way, it's well below $1 million, and the box office was over $194 million. So they banked quite a lot off this movie from their budget. And even though there were only 5 people in the movie, one doesn't even speak, and carries on the suspense for the rest of the movie. And if you're one of those people who are bored by the first 10 minutes, don't turn it off. It takes a while to develop. At first, you may be wondering, come on, when will it get good? Exactly what I was wondering. It will, and will get you scared for a lot of things. You might want to throw out your Ouija board after you see this. Yeah, good thing I don't have one. You may play a prank on your significant other. I don't know about that type of prank because the relationship may not last too long after that. And have them freak out when they wake up on a swing. From the time Micah gets the camera is when you'll know something's going on. And then Katie wakes up in the middle of the night, and that's when it starts getting scary. You will learn that the demon is obsessed with Katie, and will do anything to get Micah out of the picture. From around the 20-minute mark, you will not want to get out of your seat. You will want to see what happens next, and when it does, you'll be begging to know what happens after that. And by the end of the movie, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you'll be begging to know what happens. Begging to know what happens next. And if you don't want to waste a lot of time, it's only 86 minutes and manages to fit everything that happens in 17 days without dragging on too long. When the end card pops up and the small little credits thing pop up, you will repeat. You will, I repeat, will be creeped. Want to be introduced to horror? You want to be introduced to horror? Great start. Alone and want to be scared in the dark? Great thing to do. Want to get your teen to start to horror? Perfect idea. If you haven't seen a good horror film in a while, rent it, watch it, or whatever streaming platform you have at the nearest DVD store in town. But I'm just going to warn you, you may want to watch with a little light on or leave the door open and flower by the door. I'll explain that in just a bit. To those of you who haven't seen it, I'll explain that in just a bit. There's going to be some spoilers here. Even though it's only 86 minutes, it's bound to scare and has a feature that some movies normally cannot do. No blood or gore, but still terrifies all the while. Now, that's a top review. Now, what are some negative reviews on this? 1 star says, on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, the 1 star says, this production is really boring and overhyped. The acting is really bad and the scenes are repetitive, especially night. The only thrill in the movie was the last 2 minutes, exactly what I said, and when it leaves with nothing but just to think. And when it ends, it leaves with nothing but just to think. The storyline isn't that clear. It lacks character development, which is a bonus as to why the film is extremely boring. Day scenes were boring plus repetitive, such as Micah looking over the camera footage and them staying in their household throughout the whole day. Overall, this film is a waste of time and could have had much better potential in acting. However, this is only my opinion. And if you feel like watching horror movies, then go for it. But for me, never again. It's a 1 for me. Now, here's the thing. So the flower on the floor, that reference, what that basically is saying is because they had been in this house and they showed like them in the house for, say, 21 nights. And one night they're hearing these humming sounds and they just hear stuff rattling in the other room or whatnot. And they go in the other room, they don't see anything. And she feels this invisible presence just breathing on her. Again, this is crazy what I'm describing here. I still have mixed thoughts on this. So they decide, all right, we're going to put some flour on the floor. And that way we can see if we wake up and there's going to be, footprints there. And guess what? There's footprints the next morning and they still don't know what's going on. I still don't know what's going on. Most people don't know what's going on. And it really wasn't explained how this whole thing originated. As far as like, why was there a demon in the house? Why was he after Katie? All that stuff. Now, let me get to Common Sense Media because I love how this website breaks down shows and movies. They gave it an 80%. Let's see. Indie, meaning independent, Scarefest doesn't need blood and gore to terrify. Are there any positive messages? Very little. The main character's plight is unexplained. They don't seem to have done anything to deserve what they go through. Unfortunately, they also can't agree on the methods or approaches to deal with it, and so most of their work is for naught. But they demonstrate some definite bravery in standing up to the beast. Yeah, the beast that we next to never see. Let's see. Violence and scariness, little. A simmering violence constantly threatens but rarely cuts loose on screen. There's actually very little physical violence, with only the tiniest hint of blood or gore. Micah and Katie argue often. And 49 parents commented on this with over 200 kids. Crazy. Now here's how they break it down. What's the story? In Paranormal Activity, Micah brings home a deluxe video camera and starts filming himself and his girlfriend Katie in their large San Diego house. It was a nice house, by the way. It seems that unseen forces have been terrifying them while they sleep, and Micah hopes to gather evidence. A psychic warns them that the trouble is probably caused by a demon, one specifically targeting Katie, and that they need professional help. But Micah wants to keep filming and work the problem out by themselves. Unfortunately, the disturbances begin to grow more and more alarming. Now, I gotta tell you. So I will admit, watching this movie the second time was only somewhat slightly around the edges better than watching it the first time. Because I'll be honest with you, watching it the first time, even with those last 2 or 3 minutes in the movie, I mean, I was pretty much sitting there just looking like this. I just, okay, yeah. Okay, so she got dragged out of bed, which was very questionable, and it's arguably scary. And then his body gets thrown from afar towards the camera, knocks the camera on the floor, and then she just has this demonic look on her face, and it just cuts to black. Now, as far as that subtext that they were talking about by saying after it cut to black before it went to end credits, it basically said Micah's body was found October 2006. Katie's whereabouts are unknown. Now, here's what gets even crazier. And I didn't even know this at first. And I'll tell you. Apparently, there were 3 different endings to this movie. There was the theatrical ending, which I think was the one that I saw when I watched it on Max. So the first 4 or 5 movies are on Max, maybe 6. And I know the 7th one is on Paramount Plus, the newer one. And whenever I watch them, I'll get to them as well. So there's the theatrical version, there's the original version, and then there's the new alternate ending. Now, let me describe to you what each of these endings were, how it really boils down. So the original ending, or I should rather say the theatrical ending, which is the one you'll see if you watch it on Max, basically shows her getting dragged out of bed and into the darkness, into the dark, and she's screaming and yelling. And so he gets out of bed and he's like, I gotta help her. He goes into the dark. You hear them both yelling, and all of a sudden you hear nothing. His body gets thrown from the dark, hit the camera. She has the demonic face as she's approaching the camera, cuts to black. Now, that was the theatrical ending. The original ending, which I would argue is a little bit better, is where, so after they get done screaming in the dark, unseen, she comes up and she has blood on her shirt and she's carrying a knife. What appears to be a butcher knife, looking like Michael Myers, but without the mask. So she sits on the floor near the bed and she's just rocking back and forth for hours and hours. The police come in and they're just, you can hear them like, hey, police, flashlight, all that stuff, guns. And they come into her room, they see her there, she gets up, and now all of a sudden she's not possessed. And she's like, Micah. And she goes towards the officers with a knife, not thinking. Officer shoots her, appears to be killed, cuts to black. That was the original ending. I would argue that that's better than the theatrical ending. Now here's the new alternate ending. The new alternate ending is, think of the theatrical ending, but her approaching the camera, staring at it for a few seconds, taking her butcher knife, slashing her neck, collapsing to the floor, and that's it. Now, I'm kind of torn between the original and the new alternate ending. Part of me kind of leans a little bit more towards the original. But again, it's still, there's too many unanswered questions. It's like, well, why was this demon here? How did it originate? Why was it targeting Katie? There's too many questions. So the second time watching it, like I said, the first time I was just looking at it, just staring at it the whole time, like, yeah, I just wasted an hour and a half. But the second time, those last couple minutes, I will admit I was a little bit more on edge. I still don't think it was as scary as what people made it out to be. There's plenty of movies out there that I would say are way scarier. I mean, this definitely, in my opinion, it doesn't touch Insidious or, anything of that level, The Conjuring, things like that. But let me continue a little bit more with what Commons Media had to say about it. Parents gave it a 60%, kids gave it another 60%. Made for a very low budget with minimal actors and settings, this is an effective horror movie that's more dependent on ideas than on spectacle or gore. Like horror classics ranging from Cat People to The Haunting to The Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity suggests its terrors rather than explicitly showing them. which leaves far more to the imagination and sends more genuine chills up the spine. The well-paced daytime scenes are comparatively relaxing as Micah and Katie try to figure out their dilemma, but the nighttime scenes offer something spookier. Okay, I'll give it that much. I'm like, okay, the nighttime scenes is a little bit more. The couple sleeps in a static wide shot. The bed, the doorway, and part of the hall are visible. The scary part can be a sound or an image, more so sounds, but it can originate from anywhere within the frame. The movie always keeps viewers off guard. Some of the characters' behavior can grate, but that's a minor quibble in an otherwise satisfying, terrifying experience. Talk to your kids about. Families can talk about the conception. I'm sorry, what's wrong with me right now? I can't read right now. Families can talk about the concept of random violence and paranormal activity, as in the demon's seemingly meaningless attacks on Katie. What would cause someone or something to strike out without a reason? How would this make a person feel? Pretty much like she did. Constantly terrified, confused, wondering what the hell's going on. This is crazy. Like, why me? How scary was the movie? What scared you the most and why? And how did you feel about being scared? If I had to pick one part of the movie that scared me the most, I would say, again, in the last few minutes, after she was dragged out of bed, after Micah went into the other room, they were both yelling for a couple seconds and then they both stopped. At that point, I was sitting here looking like, okay, what now? That part about him getting thrown into the camera, I didn't even remember that from watching it the first time. Probably because I was only paying half attention because it was so boring to me. But looking at it this time, I'm like, okay, I see what some people are talking about to a certain degree. Now, overall, my personal rating on this movie, honestly, I feel that I wouldn't put it above a 7. I feel it should get at least a 5. I'm thinking 5.5, maybe 6. I feel like 6 would be the appropriate number for that on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, your opinion might vary. Your opinion could be very different. So, did you think that this was one of the most boring movies you've seen in your life? Do you think this is one of the most exciting movies you've seen in your life? Do you think this was somewhere in the middle? How would you compare it to other movies that are considered found footage, or even other movies that are not found footage but are non-slasher horror films? I mean, how do you compare this to like an Insidious, for example? And that's kind of a biased take that I keep bringing that up because Insidious is my favorite non-slasher horror franchise. If you haven't seen that, you're greatly missing out. But if you want to watch this movie, it's on Max. And yeah, so props to them. They made a lot more money off this movie than I ever would have guessed they would have. I mean, you're talking $215,000 on the budget and $194 million at the box office. And I think part of the reason I thought the movie was boring because I remember seeing the trailer years ago, and the trailer looked more exciting than the movie itself. I hate when they do that. False advertisement, if you ask me. I mean, they've done that with a few things. They've done it with movies, shows, video games, but I mean, hey, I guess that's part of the business. So overall, I guess I would give it a 6, and I'm going to watch some of the other movies. From what I understand, the second movie is a prequel to the first one, so we'll see how that goes. And you just tell me your thoughts. Did you see the movie? And if so, what are your thoughts? I got a lot more movies to talk about here. Go through the Paranormal Activity films. I still got to cover the Prom Night films, the rest of the Chucky films. And yeah, there's a lot more to talk about. So like and subscribe. Stay tuned.